Weavile is a top tier berry specialist in Pokemon Sleep. In fact, under the right conditions, it's the best berry specialist of all. If you're a believer of the berry specialist meta, you cannot miss out on this, but unfortunately, it is a bit pay to win. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video, it's Brovini here. Today, we are only talking about Weavile and Sneasel. Both of their ingredient and skill rates have been finalized on the Raininex website, and this thing is insane. Sneasel doesn't have a level requirement to evolve. It evolves with an item, Razor Claw, and 80 candies at nighttime. It is a dozing sleep type Pokemon that's currently available in Snowdrop and Greengrass. And it has a fairly high requirement to encounter. We're looking at something like 6 million drowsy power requirement for even the 1-star to show. Compared to the likes of Houndour or even Houndoom, which are much lower in drowsy power requirement, you're just going to be encountering Houndours a lot more. Weavile has a really good speed at 45 minutes base frequency. Compare that to the likes of Houndoom, which is at 55 minutes frequency. So based on speed alone, Weavile is already about 20% faster, but unfortunately for Weavile, it does have a higher ingredient rate. Compared to Houndoom, who's at 20%, pretty standard amount for an ingredient rate, Weavile sits at a pretty high 25%, which is normally not what we want for a berry specialist. But what is good news about this ingredient rate is that Weavile can farm eggs, especially if you don't have a lot of egg options. For example, you haven't got a good Snover or Delibird. Weavile has a pretty low skill trigger rate. We're looking at a daily trigger amount less than half of Dedenne for the same skill. Although I probably wouldn't complain, because if you've seen my last video about Tasty Chance S, you'll know that the amount of triggers matters less than when it triggers. So the very fact that Weavile even has Tasty Chance to begin with is insanely strong. So the main thing that makes Tasty Chance S strong is the very fact that it exists to begin with, not how many times it trigger. I hope that makes sense. If not, check out my other video about Tasty Chance S. At the time, I was focused on talking about Dedenne. But it's important you know the difference between Tasty Chance and Charge Strength skill. Charge Strength is just a linear improvement, so you can linearly compare one Pokemon to another. But Tasty Chance changes throughout the week depending on how many meals there are left to cook and when you last had an extra tasty. What also makes Tasty Chance S a very powerful addition to a berry specialist, unlike to an ingredient specialist, is that there's really no limit to using a berry specialist, since berries will always continually provide strength to Snorlax. Whereas if you compare to the likes of Cramorant, who farms oil or potato, considering that it has to rotate out of the team once you've farmed enough ingredients, otherwise any excess ingredients you farm due to bag limits or recipe limit or pot size, well, you simply wouldn't be seeing much value in keeping Cramorant on the field. So between investing seeds in a Weavile and investing seeds in a Cramorant, I'd probably be more inclined to raise Weavile's skill level than Cramorant. Although between Dedenne and Weavile, that's a tricky one, because Weavile would still mainly be a Snowdrop Pokemon. And yes, you can use it anywhere, but Dedenne can proc earlier and then allow another Pokemon who's actually correctly favorite berry matched to take its place. So I'm on the fence about Weavile versus Dedenne, but I think they're both good additions to any team as long as you utilize that skill appropriately. And that is by changing out the Pokemon once the skill has triggered once until Extra Tasty occurs. Then it can come back in and trigger again. Except of course, if Weavile actually also matches the favorite berry that week, Weavile being a dark berry specialist, it should probably just stay on the team all week anyway. And we're going to look at the numbers right now about the berry strength. There are two ways to compare berry strength: with and without sneaky snacking. For berry specialists, we have to consider sneaky snacking because they're the best at overnight long sleep when inventory often reaches its limit. So then the Pokemon end up farming only berries, making berry specialists shine in those situations. What I've done is given berry finding S to all Pokemon and compared berry strength. And it may not be a surprise to you that Steelix remains at the top of the game, based on berries alone, followed by Typhlosion, Meganium, Raichu, Ninetales, and then Weavile. And just by looking at this ranking alone, Weavile is already quite respectable. In fact, outdoing the previous berry specialist for Dark-type berries, Houndoom, by about 20% berry strength, which, by the way, dethrones Meowscarada as a dual-type specialist for dark berries. One of the reasons why Meowscarada, being an ingredient specialist, did so well for berries as long as it has berry finding, it was because of its amazing speed. That had almost beat out Houndoom. So then we called it a dual specialist. But now that Weavile is here, Meowscarada as a berry focused Pokemon doesn't actually make that much sense. Which is fine because Meowscarada still has the mono potato role. It can still focus on farming on potatoes. By the way, this is the frequency for Meowscarada, which is 43 minutes, compared to the 45 of Weavile. Now, there is another way to look at berry specialists, and that is to force their inventory to be full so that they're always sneaky snacking. One of the problems causing the berry strength to reduce is because of its high ingredient rate. Now we're going to look at the sneaky snacking conditions and see who comes out on top. I go to the RatingX calculator, under others, I turn on always full. In which case, now you can see Weavile is at the top of the list. And this is a serious power creep because under the right conditions, nobody beats Weavile. Under sneaky snacking conditions, Steelix does fall a little bit in the list, with Raichu rising to the top before Weavile's arrival, but now Raichu is in second place, followed by Typhlosion and Feraligatr. Heck, even Sneasel makes it pretty high on the list, beating out Altaria, Houndoom, Clefable during sneaky snacking. And all of these are fully evolved. Hopefully we'll actually see a Mega Houndoom in the future, otherwise Houndoom will just be useless except as a temporary Weavile until you find a good one. Not only that though, if we actually turn on ribbons so that unevolved Pokemon get a speed boost, and that includes Sneasel and Onix, take a look at what happens. Sneasel rises above Meganium in sneaky snacking conditions, above even Walrein. But even just looking at this list alone isn't enough to do Weavile justice, considering that it has Tasty Chance S. So let's think about how we can value Tasty Chance. So comparing the skill rate of the 3 Pokemon that have Tasty Chance S, Weavile triggers less than half of the skill specialist equivalent, and Cramorant triggers actually more than half of the skill specialist equivalent. The downside of Cramorant, and why I'm not a big fan of investing main seeds on Cramorant, is that it will be limited based on whether you actually need the oil or the potatoes from it. Otherwise, if you're leaving it on the field just to trigger the skill, and you can't actually make use of its ingredients in that week, or maybe you've already reached your ingredient bag limit, then it's just better to run Dedenne instead. Of course, if all the ingredients match that dish type in that week, then Cramorant is great as well for the skill. The advantage of Weavile, and why I think they had to nerf the skill trigger rate compared to Cramorant, is that Weavile can stay on the team infinitely. Snorlax never stops eating berries. Even if it's not favorite, it can continue to utilize the berry strength. So being able to keep on the field for longer means that there's more value in investing main seeds on a Tasty Chance S on a Weavile compared to a Cramorant. It's a question of whether you want those skill trigger to happen faster, so then Dedenne will be better, or you just want it to happen at some point. And this is the tricky part about understanding Tasty Chance S. The main value of Tasty Chance S comes from having a lot of remaining dishes in the week. So in other words, it's worth more earlier in the week. And the value of Tasty Chance S isn't linearly better each time you trigger. Its strength tapers off very quickly. So having more triggers is not as important as timing the triggers. You adding more triggers before the first meal because you're using Dedenne instead of Weavile doesn't actually improve that skill by as much as you'd hope. Again, this is covered in a previous video, so I won't go through that in depth. So the existence of this skill actually just makes Weavile good, at least for an early trigger. So we can't actually make a direct comparison for the number of triggers between Dedenne and Weavile. We can't actually say because there's half the triggers, the skill strength will be halved. Although what we could do is if we pretend that both Pokemon run the entire week, we could use the Monte Carlo simulations that the math court had done. Since Dedenne triggers about 4 times per day, at level 6 main skill for the entire week, you're looking at a 26% dish strength boost. Compared to if you're also using Weavile the entire week at 2 triggers per day, you're looking at a 17% dish strength improvement. So for half the triggers, it's actually not half the strength. Just note that these numbers are for the entire week of dishes. Alternatively, to be even better of a gamer, what you could do is once the skill has triggered, you swap out the Pokemon until extra tasty occurs, then you swap in one of these Pokemon again, and that would give you the most value because you'll probably want to spend time farming ingredients anyway if you want to make this skill good. So without a doubt, Weavile is a very strong addition, if not the best addition we've had for Berry Specialists in this game. In fact, if you get a really good one and you haven't actually got a Dedenne yet, you can just use it for the Tasty Chance at skill. Since half the triggers isn't actually half the skill strength, we're looking at better than half the skill strength. So I'm not complaining having a Weavile instead of a Dedenne. Where Dedenne still shines though is that you want more of those triggers if your first meal is a massively expanded pot by carrying over cooking power up from the previous week. Then Dedenne is probably still preferred because you want to have more triggers before you cook that first meal. And in addition to all that, Weavile is an evolution Pokemon, meaning that compared to Cramorant and Dedenne, you're getting 1 free skill level if you catch it as Sneasel, despite its costs. But Cramorant and Dedenne are both 16 bars to fill anyway. So in that sense, Sneasel is actually just better even for free to play that are looking for a Tasty Chance as Pokemon. Let me know if you have any questions about Sneasel and Weavile and whether you will actually be farming for one despite its high costs. Thank you for watching guys, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.